Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'll let everyone take some time to connect to audio, video. If you want to turn on your cameras, we always like seeing your faces. Um, Hello. Welcome where everyone is calling in from. Excited to have you all here. Before we get into all the fun juicy stuff, I always like to ask everyone to just grab the chat box, open that up, and if you can just let us know where you're calling in from. It's fun to see where everyone is from all around the world. And then let us know if you have ever been to India before. And if not, if you're planning a trip in the future, it's always just good to get a sense of what we have for that. So my name is Laura. I am super excited to have you all here today with us. I have been hosting these for a while now. I'm a travel advisor and travel blogger at Travel 80 by 80. And I'm excited to be hosting Candice today. So before we get started, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And just one second, hold on, and then share with you some of the all the fun things we have about TNN that probably a lot of you are aware of, but we're going to talk through it anyway. So welcome to the Nomadic Network and our virtual events. So TNN, that we lovingly like to call the Nomadic Network, is a community of travelers inspiring each other to see the world. It was founded by Nomadic Matt, and now it is run and owned by Lisa Field. We're so happy that she has decided to take it over. We've hosted over 250 virtual events. You can find us at thenomadicnetwork.com, and we have a lot of amazing community tours coming up next year in 2025. I'll share a little bit more about that at the end, but definitely you can find more information about that on our Instagram. You can find us on TNN, our YouTube channel. You can register virtual events, which you have here, so you know how to do that. And then obviously you can travel with us to those community tours I was talking about in 2025. Couple things. A lot of y'all turned your videos on. I love it. It makes it so much more fun and engaging. So I appreciate that. I do keep everyone muted though for the duration of the call, just so we can make sure we hear our presenter. But I know everyone likes to chat through the chat box, so it's definitely use that to connect with everyone. And that's where you'll ask your questions as well. I'll keep track of all of that. So if you can just write the word question first, and then write out your question, and I will make sure at the end of the chat I get that answered for you. And then it's always great to follow our speakers and support them. I'll drop Candice's information in the chat box because they're volunteers. They're doing this out of the kindness of their hearts to share their passion with you. So let's have some fun and enjoy this conversation today. So before I hand it over to Candice, I'm just going to do a quick intro of her. So Candice of Chasing Candice is a travel and lifestyle content creator, a van lifer, and a dedicated slow traveler who has over 15 years of experience exploring diverse cultures, histories, and landscapes all around the world. Her immersive approach has led her through 16 weeks of travel across India, where she documented all of her journeys with writing, photography, video, and she connected deeply with the local communities and learning all about their traditions. And today she's here to share with us all about how to travel responsibly and safely through India. So Candice, I will let you take it on over from here.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. So nice to have you all. Let's get me share my screen for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to Destination India. Let's travel responsibly and safely. India is a huge country, and so it's very diverse. So you could start in the north and then end up in the south, and it would be like going to a whole different continent. Like not just from a landscapes and ecology standpoint, but from a culture, history perspective. And so it's interesting whenever we're thinking about India to think about it in a way of it's always ever changing. India is a space where you can grow into your best self in a lot of ways. It's also a place that can chew you up and spit you out, right? That's why we're all here, is to not have the latter and to be as purposeful and intentional through our travels there so we can have the best time possible, right? So today we're going to discuss why go to India in the first place, right? I think the root of it is the cultural richness. And it's like the mecca for any like explorer or traveler because it is so difficult to travel in India. It forces you out of your comfort zone in every possible way, especially as a Westerner. So that's, in my opinion, the root of why to travel to India. It's just rich and diverse and vibrant in a way that we don't have here, right? And then as far as experiences go, we're going to go through a couple different ones. Like Laura said, I spent 16 weeks in India, and I've done that in different little bits and pieces, right? So I did in 2018, my first trip in India, where I spent most of my time in the south. I was there for 8 weeks, staying at a yoga ashram for 1 month, and then slowly working my way up the southwestern coast with a bunch of girls that I'd met at the ashram and people that I had met just like along the journey. I also had some solo time in there. And then my second trip was on my first like organized tour as a participant. And that was an all women's tour. And it was 2 weeks through northern India, the Golden Triangle in Rajasthan. And then I spent another month traveling solo and with a couple friends. Maybe 6 weeks. I might have lied about those 16 weeks. It might have been a lot more than that. And then I stayed, I bounced around the South again with some friends, showing them places that I had been and going to new places with them and then traveling a little bit by myself as well. Um, like any travel, I think that immersion is really key. And so we're going to talk about how to immerse yourself in a responsible way, not just for you, but for the communities that we're visiting, as well as some just like general advice about traveling to India. I know we've all heard a lot of rumors and a lot of different ideas of, well, India's this way or India's that way, or you shouldn't take the train, but you should take the train. And there's just a lot of like back and forth. And India, in my opinion, and even from all my friends in India, they always say that India is a place of duality. It's never either or black or white. It's always yes and. Like the trains are difficult. Yes, and they're also pretty efficient. Yes, and they also bring all people to where they need to be in a way that's inclusive for everybody, right? And there's safe spaces, there's everything that you need on the train, right? So it's a country of duality in every possible way. A little bit about me. I am a photographer. I do a lot of photojournalism and writing about travel. I started out as a tour guide and a wilderness guide for about 15 years, all the while traveling very immersively because I'd have, 6 months off. So I would go backpack around Europe or go backpack around India, or I'd go to wherever it happened to be, right? And I would just leave. But with that, and like being on the tourism side behind the scenes and then going to being a traveler, you learn a lot of different do's and don'ts, right? Like when to be immersive, when to check your own biases, right? And like take off the lens of being a Westerner and just see things as they are. And India is one of those places that you really have to be conscientious of when you're applying a Western lens to an Eastern place and culture, right? So that's a little bit of my background. We've talked a little bit about the variety of trips I've taken. Um, yeah, immersing yourself in India is the best. To this day, I still make Indian food like once a week. Like every time I go, I end up bringing like 5 kilos of spices in my backpack. Like I only carry a backpack and most of it, like I save at least a third of the backpack to bring spices home every year. Okay, let's dive into why travel to India. I think one of the big things is that duality, right? So this quote by Dina Mose is India teaches me again and again that the categories in which I try to divide things don't hold up. And India is a way of challenging all of those ideas. Anything that you have categorized in your brain, oh, this is what that is, this is like the best way of eating or living or traveling or whatever. India will completely disrupt that because it varies so much by region and it varies so much by situation. India is a very situational place with a lot of context and nuance. Um, every single region of India is so incredibly different. A friend of mine told me you could spend 6 lifetimes traveling through India and you would still not understand even the surface. And it's incredibly accurate. Every state within India has its own vibe. Every city has its own vibe, which we'll get into a little bit more when we go through the Golden Triangle and the surrounding areas. But one of the big things with like India that we have to understand before going is that it does have a lot of nuance. Its history, its spirituality, its regions all are different. And the history through northern India is going to be very different than that of southern India. It also has turbulent history, and they're not a country to shy away from acknowledging the harsh realities of things that they've done, even like within their own country, right? And so their history is deep. There's a lot of nuance there. There's the caste system that they're still trying to parse out from, and it's still prevalent, and it's still our history really sets the foundation of everything that we are as a society, right? And India is still dealing with the ramifications and whatnot of the caste system. And they're kind of teasing out, what do they keep? What do they leave behind? How do we move forward in a way that's intentional and helpful for all people, while also not bypassing our history and traditions, right? And so India is a place of ever changing, ever evolving life, right? Like it's a vibrant, lively space. And what one person does in one place has a deep ripple across. And you'll see that when you go there, and like one shopkeeper might change his prices in this way. Well, that's going to influence everybody along the line, right? And just like the caste system, if the lower caste isn't helping clean up the streets, then that means that they're not going to have travelers, they're not going to have like there's just so much, and it's all so interconnected, just like our systems here. India is also interesting in that its spirituality is so varied. You've got Muslims, Hindu, and then every subset in between. We also have in the southwest of India, um, the world's oldest known record of Christianity. And so it's interesting that our spirituality throughout the country is changing, and it's important to recognize that everybody has a different space and a different place that they're coming from, and understanding them while taking off the Western lens and being able to appreciate and be open to them is very, very, very important. I think that's whenever we have the love-hate relationship that people tend to have from India, is if you go in with a Western mindset and then you show up in an Eastern place, it's going to be very jostling. There's already going to be some culture shock no matter what. And then not taking off those glasses will just make that culture shock even greater in a way that's it'll chew you up and spit you out, right? That's where you have all of the like people who are very pro India or very against India and traveling to India. So it's important to travel with an open mind and embrace the depth, the vibrancy, the beautiful colors, the rich traditions and whatnot, because it is super intense and it's beautiful. And when you can open yourself up to the lessons of India and like experiences and whatnot, you'll just grow so much as a person, because it's a challenging space while also being so supportive. We'll go through the classic to start, of course. So we're going to talk about the Golden Triangle and Rajasthan. So the Golden Triangle is a specific region, which we'll get into, but it's always been a Mecca for travelers. It was a Mecca for spiritual pilgrimages, according to Hindu mythology, since the beginning of time. And then it became a pilgrimage of spirituality for US citizens and the Westerners in like the 50s, 60s, and it really started to boom in the 70s, which we see in like Lonely Planet, the like Lonely Planet guides. They actually got their start going through the Golden Triangle. They bought like a really cheap car in London and said, we're just going to go east. And they got to Afghanistan. Their car broke down. They bought motorcycles, and then they traveled all through India, going through the Golden Triangle. And then, because it was like a well-traveled path, they were like, well, this is like the path you go. So we'll just go and do it. So they did. They went to Thailand after that. And then they ended up in Australia off of this boat or this bicycle. And so it's very important to recognize like India has always been a Mecca and it's always been a place of travelers and whatnot. Um, Super interesting though to see that Lonely Planet got its start in the Golden Triangle, doing all of this stuff, and it's pretty incredible. If you haven't listened to their story, How I Built This on NPR is pretty wonderful for that. Um, we've talked a lot about the vibrancy, the history, the spirituality. Another thing to be aware of is the climates. So Rajasthan and the Golden Triangle, you're going to go through mountainous ranges all the way to like intense deserts, like food food deserts. There's nothing there. Kind of looks like the Saharas. It's really cool. Another thing to think about between the north. The north is an industrious space, right? So you have Delhi. This is the Golden Triangle here. So here we have Delhi at the top, and then we have Agra here right down a little lower. So these are all within 100 miles of each other, and then Jaipur. So that's why it's called the Golden Triangle. It's super easy to travel around. There's buses, trains, everything. Um, and that's why it's such a great, well-traveled tourist path, is that you get to see history, culture in a small, relatively small space. Like you learn so much about the country and in such a tiny space. It's very well traveled. And depending on, it's just like in the US where like if you go to Canada, or like I shouldn't say Canada, um, every country has its bias, right? And they're like, oh well, if you go to the south, then that's dangerous. You gotta be really careful. And if you go to the north, you gotta be really careful. It's super dangerous. It's the same in India. So people of the north always talk crap about the people in the south. And then even people up a little northern of them, they'll talk crap about each other. So it's all just talking crap about each other. So that's where a lot of like our like some of um the ideas of like, oh, crime is so much worse in the north than it is in the south. Well, yes, that's a little bit of a rumor, but there's also quantitative facts that show, yeah, there's a little bit more crime in the north. And part of that is because there's just so much more people and it's a very industrial space. It also has the lowest education of anywhere else in India. So you've got a lot of different systems coming together, so it's important to recognize like that's part of it. It's the nuance of travel, right? And recognizing that there's more than just, oh, there's crime because there's tourists. No, that's not totally it. There's a lot more to it. Also with northern India being a little bit more industrial, you'll see a little bit more pollution. So be aware as you're traveling. They don't have the same infrastructure to get rid of garbage and whatnot. And so it's going to be important for us as travelers to limit our impact and recognize our carbon footprint as we're traveling through India, because they just don't have the facilities, right? Here we'll talk to you a little bit. Let's break this down a little because the Golden Triangle is super interesting. Delhi, right here. This is the gateway to India. Delhi is a metropolis in every sense of the word. It's the most bustling city I've ever been to in my whole life. It's overwhelming, it's overstimulating, but it's also beautiful, and like the food is so good. You can try any like street food. We'll get into that eventually, but street food in Delhi is so good. So good. And then there's tons of like beautiful, iconic infrastructure and sites. Like the Qutb Minar was built in like the 12th century and still stands, and it's gorgeous. It looks perfect. Like nothing has happened to it. It's stunning. Then they have like the Chandigarh Chalk Market, which is also a wonderful spot to go, just like appetizer dinner through and eat some of the best foods. Like there's one restaurant I got the chicken tikka masala, and it was like from the recipe was passed down from chefs that served the king. And so it's like the most popular restaurant in Delhi, and for good reason. Sure, some of these places are like touristy and you shouldn't go, but like there's some places that are touristy for a reason and it is worth the visit. You know what I mean? Um, and then we go to Agra, right? And so Agra is where the Taj Mahal is, the Red Fort. It's stunning. It's definitely worth a visit. I know that everybody says, "Oh, well, it's overplayed. You don't need to go." You need to go. It's out of this world. It's so beautiful and grand in a way that you cannot wrap your head around unless you're standing right there. Another thing to be mindful of here is I'll show you a photo of the Taj. Actually, but let's just go into it now. But this is the Taj. I did have to color correct a little bit on the Taj because, well, see, there's a tannery really close by, and the pollution's so bad that the Taj is actually tinted slightly yellow. So it's not quite as white as we all think it is, just because it's been slowly tinted. And I got super lucky. Like, this was the clearest day that they had seen in a long time. And if you look at any other like travel bloggers and stuff in their photos of the Taj, it's usually quite cloudy. When we went there the next day, which I'll show you a photo of that later, that one was like, it was so hazed in, you couldn't see the Taj at all, like from very close by. It was just hazy, and that's just part of it. Like, there's a lot of industrial factories in this part of India. And then we have Rajasthan. So right here, this whole region, it's the state of Rajasthan, and it has Jaipur, which is the pink city. And it's, as we go through the next couple cities, they all have like a fun reason for the name. So the pink city, it's actually painted pink. Like, all of the forts and palaces had been painted because in the 1870s, the Queen of England at the time was coming to visit, and they wanted to like really wow her. So the king of Jaipur decided, well, pink is the color of hospitality. Let's paint the whole city pink. And it's just been carrying on ever since. So that's the reason that the Pink City is the Pink City. But it's beautiful because you go through these winding streets, and up on the hillside, you see this big giant fort. You go around the corner, there's a little lake in the middle of town, and there's like a castle in the middle of the lake with no land seemingly all around it. It just looks like a castle was picked up and plopped in it, you know? Um, there's also really cool movement happening in India over the last, especially in the last decade. It's been, generations of this movement moving forward, but in the last decade, we've had a big, huge shift in women's empowerment. And there's now business owners in, like, women are allowed to be business owners now in India. And there's a tour company in Jaipur called the Pink City Rickshaw Company. And it's all women owned, all women operated. Women also weren't allowed to drive until very recently. And so it's a big deal that they have a business that they're able to operate. Even whenever I was there in 2022, like, they were still getting terrible looks and comments from the other tuk-tuk drivers for being women and whatnot. And so if you do go, Pink City Rickshaw, it's where it's at. Then we also have Jaipur, right? So Jaipur is the blue city, and it's known as the Blue City. It's another, in my opinion, you've got the Golden Triangle. And then you've got Rajasthan, which it was a big bustling city in the 13th century, especially for trade and tourism. So we had a lot of kings, a lot of money, tons of merchants. So there's just like a lot of money flowing into the area. So that's why you see so many beautiful palaces and forts and whatnot. So I think there's like a subcategory of just Rajasthan spaces to go. So this is some of those cities that I visited on the all women's tour that I went on in 2022. The Blue City is on a hillside, and all the buildings are painted blue to represent the Lord Shiva. The Blue City was a hub for Brahmins, it's the caste of the priests, right? And so they've been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It's been the city of priests. And it's because Lord Shiva, in protecting the planet, had to drink a poison that turned his skin blue. And so they started painting the city this auspicious blue to represent Lord Shiva and their enlightened state, right? Then we have Jaisalmer. So this is right here, this top corner picture. It looks like beautiful, intricate designings, right? Like, do you think that's carved out of wood? Do you think it's stone? Where are we at, right? What is this? It's sandstone that people carved by hand in the 13th century, and it still looks stunning. This is also how they would have natural air conditioning throughout their giant palaces. Um, so if you can get to the Golden City, Jaisalmer, it's worth it because you get to see just palaces and palaces. And this is also part of Jaisalmer, which you can take little tiny boats and go around the lake and whatnot. So like the whole city looks so similar to this, right? In my opinion, the North is a place of contrast and chaos because you have this like beautiful history that's rich, but also has its darkness, right? Like women were not treated well in the time that this was built, right? And so there's nuance, there's difficulties there. Like there's always the light with the dark. Um, and the North is definitely an overwhelming space of contrast and chaos. It's beautiful, it's empowering, but there's also the overwhelm of it, the busyness of it. There's a lot there. Um, yeah, it's incredible though. You'll love it. Okay, we'll go into the coast now. So the southwest coast and the backwaters. This is where you'll find like the mellow peace, right? If you think of island time in Hawaii, we've got coastal time here. Everything moves at a slower pace. This is where Ayurveda was born. So that's ancient Indian medicine was born here in the South. So that infiltrates every aspect of their life, right? So every activity, every food, every meal that's planned throughout the day is based on Ayurveda, based on inner healing, as well as like functioning at your best. The South is also the wealthiest part of the country and the most educated. So you'll have a very different experience community-wise here. I started in the South for my very first trip, and as soon as I got there, everybody said, "Oh, it's so good that you started here. You'll actually enjoy India." And it's like, well, I mean, yes, but that's not very nice to northern India, you know? So it's important to recognize the bias and that every place has a time and place, right? Like I love the South. I love the relaxation of it, but I also really love the North for the history, the bustling nature of it all, and like the vibrancy in its own way. So it's important to recognize the difference. Here are some of the backwaters and the coast, right? So in the South, you can take these big boats like these. And this is just a day trip boat. You can see with all the lights and whatnot up here, but there's others that look almost just like this that have rooms down below. And you could spend like 2 weeks going through the backwaters, which look like this, just traveling around in this beautiful houseboat. Or you can take one of these little boats like this and just putz around for the day, or kayak or whatever. Um, the South moves so much slower. And in my opinion, I've always had the best luck with tours and stuff and these types of things where I get to the location and I meet the people who own the hostel or the hotel or whatnot, and I kind of gauge if I want to book through them based on like how easy it is, if it feels like a good fit for me, if it seems well organized and put together, um, or if I end up like walking down the street and end up meeting people, because that's always a possibility. You always walk down the street and you're like, oh, you own a boat company? Cool. Like, oh, your cousin owns it? Sweet. Okay, let's see. So it's there's a certain level of like letting intuition guide you and then also being aware of your surroundings and not like putting yourself in a bad situation. Um, which is always with life, right? Um, the local buses to get around too, like from here, from this little like this tall little spire to get to like this area, this beach. It was only 20 minutes on a bus. And it was incredibly easy. It was always on time. The local buses are stellar. Like the trains are it's usually a little late. The buses sometimes are. It's island time, coastal time. You'll get there. The buses are great. You end up meeting wonderful people. I've never been more fed than I have been on a train in India. You'll be a part of their family. I have friends that I still keep in contact with who came up to me because their little daughter wanted a photo, and now they send me monthly emails about what their daughter's up to and how their life is, and if they moved to a new city or if they bought a new house. India is like such a vibrant place that, yes, can chew you up and spit you out, but for the most part, like they just welcome you with open arms. Like everybody's so excited you're there. It's a good place to just lean in, right? So whenever I went there for the first time, I started my journey at a yoga ashram. So I went to Padma Karma, which is the first and only women-owned yogashala in India. And I think at this point, because that was 2018, I think there's a little bit more. Even in the north, I think that there's like 3 ashrams that are women-owned, but it's always a tough one. Um, India functions so well, but it makes no sense how it functions so well sometimes, because it's like you go to sign up for like a train ticket on the internet and it requires like multiple different numbers and whatnot. And so it's like, how does this function so well when it feels like the systems are made to not function well? And that's how women are struggling with being business owners in India, is that they apply for business licenses and then your application got lost in our ancient system. Sorry, and so understand that the best laid plans don't always work out in your favor, but it's usually for the best because something else even better comes along. Every missed train, every missed bus, everything that has ever happened in my time in India, it's always ended up with like a much better situation. So be a little open while you're there. In Kerala, so in this yoga retreat, we'd wake up before dawn doing sun salutations, yoga. We would go take a dip in the water here. We would just run down the beach, go swim for an hour or so, come back, have breakfast, learn a little bit, and then we would go back to doing yoga in the evening, and then we'd have our evenings free. It was all Ayurvedic. It was all of our meals were vegetarian. It was a very immersive experience where they really made you like live like a student of yoga in the ancient ways, right? We learned a ton about ancient medicines, anatomy, the way that the different poses will impact every organ of your body, right? And so it became a very inclusive, full, well-rounded teacher training. We also had a lot of free time to do other things. Like we would go to Ayurvedic treatments and stuff and get like I have a knee problem. And so they would do this like oil bath thing for my knee. Or we take cooking classes as a big giant group. And so yeah, shoot, I cook so much now because of these cooking classes. But if when you go, like cooking classes are a must, especially because like different regions have different things. The North is known for more like meat and potatoes style meals, right? It's a little hardier because it's a lot harder to live there. It's colder. You need a little bit more meat on your bones. Whereas in the South, it's a lot of vegetarian food, and a lot of spice, like hot spice. Never ask for an Indian level of spice. You will die. You'll just sweat until you die. And that would be it. And it's over and it's sad. But one of the biggest things about, going to India is like the immersion of it, right? One day I was walking through Mumbai and heard a bunch of yelling. So of course I like had to explore and check it out. I ended up in the largest gay pride festival in all of India for the first time ever in 2018. They just had like a big celebration that gay marriage was now acceptable, and it was not totally accepted by society, but legally it was accepted. And so I ended up in like a gay pride festival, which is where these photos come from, right? Um, Also going through markets for the cooking classes. We'd go to the gardens, we'd go to the markets, we'd meet the farmers, we'd pick out all of our like fresh fruits and vegetables. Immerse yourself in whatever way that you possibly can. If that also means like taking time outside more than just strolling through towns, and you want to go kayak, if you want to go on a hike, if you want to do like, if you want to just lay down by the beach, you have all of these options. It's important just to embrace the immersion of the experience, right? As far as some practical tips, preparation is really, really important here. Learning the basic phrases as you go through, and like different parts of India, of course, not everybody speaks the same language. There's a lot of sub dialects and stuff like that. And so even if you're like using Google Translate on your phone, that's a really great, easy way. A lot of people speak English in India. Even just hand gestures and charades also go a really long way. Like if you need to go to the bathroom, the like shuffle sign, everybody understands that. No matter where you go, you could just shuffle around and they'll be like, oh, bathroom. always. So like you'll be fine. But understanding a few basic phrases does give you a ton of brownie points with everybody involved. And it's important to like show respect and looking out for like learning their culture, learning a little bit about their traditions, being mindful of where they're coming from so you can meet them where they're at and they can meet you where you're at, right? Instead of expecting everybody to mold around you. I think that's like one of the biggest things to prepare yourself for. Also, knowing that their infrastructure is very different than ours. So there's not the same trash facilities. There's not somebody that comes through once a week and grabs the garbage or whatever. So be aware of your own carbon footprint while you're there. Try to bring less plastic, which leads well into water and food. Now, you're not going to want to drink water straight from the tap, but there's wonderful water filtration bottles like Life Straw. I brought my Life Straw with me 2 years ago, and it was perfect. I never had a problem, never got sick. The year before, I was staying in a lot of places also have like the big blue jugs, like the Culligan jugs. They just refill and they have a little spout to like for everybody. And it's at like almost all restaurants. They have them in every hotel or hostel. So I never had a problem with just filling up a water bottle. Um, the Life Straw was a bonus, if anything, because having clean water in those little jugs is like everywhere at this point. It's important to prep in advance, getting your vaccines that you're going to need that are specific to India, any medication that you're going to need while you're on the road. There's pharmacies all over India, but if you have specific meds, make sure that you get those in advance. I know that I got strep throat last time I was there, and I just walked up to it looked like a little hole in the wall building with um, a green cross. And I just told him like my throat and I was coughing and I like opened my mouth and he's like, "Oh, you got this." And he brought out a little tiny pack of meds and within 2 days it was all gone. So it's like everywhere. And I think it cost me like $1.50 for all of this. I just walked up to a random guy on the street. It was perfect. He showed me where to go. It was everything. Helped translate for me. It's like medicine is pretty easy to come by and people are so helpful. It sounds like I don't travel that well when I'm like, oh yeah, I just walked to a stranger on the street. Medicine. But honestly, like the people that you meet, the community you make along the way, speaking to random strangers, like it really does make the whole experience so much better. That might not be practical advice, but it is like good travel advice, right? Which leads well into the 3 A's. So this is all about being a respectful tourist. So there's a difference between appropriation versus appreciation, which I had a big conversation about this for this particular photo, right? I was very hesitant to wear the sari. I didn't want to appropriate anybody. And we had a big discussion about it with the tour guides, with locals, especially at the Taj, because we got approached so much. And I was very nervous to wear it there and be disrespectful because it is a sacred space that I did not want to be distracting for other people. And it was distracting for other people, but not for the ways that I was expecting. I was expecting to be a little bit ostracized and not appreciated for like doing this. And I was afraid that it would be appropriation, but everybody loved it so much. And that's where we decided that there's a difference between appropriation and appreciation. And when the culture is accepting, they want to see you embracing them fully. Not all Westerners come to India and see the beauty and the vibrancy and the diversity and think, yes, this is amazing. So when you show up in that way and you are embracing them and you are like excited to be there in their space, learning their skills, traditions, cultures, all of the things, right? Like it perpetuates a beauty that you don't always see. And I think that's the appreciation piece, right? If I was wearing the sari in a way that was not proper or immodest or something like that, then that would be a different story, right? Which also appearance is very important in India. And like anytime you're traveling really anywhere, it's important to recognize that different cultures have different expectations for modesty. And India is a very conservative country, especially in regards to showing skin and whatnot. And there's a fine line between be embracing your body and embracing your clothing and wanting to dress a certain kind of a way versus respecting a culture. And so the way that I approach this is that every culture has traditions and norms, and those are the framework that like you get to work within. And then those give you the guidelines to like develop your style or to find your style and to still like embrace, how do I show up in this way? Like I don't need to show my shoulders all the time. Like that's fine. I will show my style in an outward way within the parameters of. And so I think it's about reframing your mind around embracing a culture and embracing a space while also just like being flexible in your own mind and your own space and your own like ideas about dress code and appearances and showing off your body, right? Which also leads to mindful photography, which is key. At the Taj Mahal, I've been approached tons for photos. Like as a Westerner, you're gonna get approached. If you have light colored hair, you're gonna get approached. There's gonna be random people that come up and grab you and say, photo, photo. And there's a balance because like if you say yes to everybody, you'll never leave. And you will never get to see the things that you wanted to see because you'll just be taking photos for 2 hours and it's the worst. And your face hurts. So there's a balance, right? Of like, if there's a little girl, not at the Taj because it was too busy, but if there's like a little kid that wants a photo with me, I will always say yes, always. Um, if it's a group of teenage boys, that's a no every time. So there's a balance, right? And knowing when to take photos of other people is also very key. Like you want to know when to take a photo of others where it's if the photo's focused on them and they're the centerpiece, then make sure that you ask permission, you develop a little bit of rapport, you show them the photo that you've taken. If it's a general photo of a scene, be a little bit aware of like, are those people gonna, if roles were reversed and you were in those people's position, would you want that photo taken, right? So be aware of that, especially like responsibly interacting with locals with a camera or just in general is very important. Learning to support local businesses while you're out too is also a huge way to give back. Um, Little trinkets, little food things like street food, all of those things are really helpful and like supporting local businesses in a way that feels aligned for you. Like for me, I don't like the mass produced stuff that you see. Like, you know, when you go to Myanmar or somewhere where it's like everybody has the sand paintings and it's like every 10 steps you see the same sand paintings and they're like, I did this myself. And it's like, that's cool. Not for me. Like there's ways to find businesses that align with you. India is such a diverse place. There's so much to offer. You'll find things, you'll find businesses to support, you'll find the people that you want to support. But remember to support the small local guys before supporting the bigger chains and whatnot, right? Also be careful with, there's a lot of begging in different parts of India, especially in the north, just because the cost of living is pretty great in comparison to the income of the people. So the north is pretty poor. And so you see a lot, and there's also not a lot of services and access for women who are like, if they're a single mom or something has happened to them, or there's like a medical issue and they don't have family to help support. Like there's a lot of ways to end up in the streets, similar to the US. And so it's important when you're seeing begging to like exercise a little bit of caution. Instead of giving money directly to a person, especially if it's their kids. Sometimes kids are taken out of school or not brought to school and because they know that they'll make more money if their children are with them. So be aware when you do give, if you do give, of the context, the situation, and what you might be perpetuating in giving to people on the street. There's a fine line. Another way to get around this that I found is looking for reputable nonprofits that are supporting the people and different organizations. And that's generally pretty easy to find either on the internet or while you're there. I often go to like community spaces and like tourism centers and any like communal space for the community. And I'll ask around if I have the time, of course. If I'm on like a all women's guided tour where it's bang, 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 bang for 2 weeks, like I can't. But those are really great places to start when you're wanting to know more about the area, if you're wanting to know how to give back in a more meaningful way than, you know, perpetuating something that could be very harmful in the long run, right? Um, oh, and then also, so this is the pink city. Remember the buildings that are painted pink? This is the pink. This is the main palace. And then this guy. You'll see this everywhere. Look at how heavy this bicycle is. And he's just pushing it through like it's nothing. This is at the Red Fort, right, in Agra. This right here, you see that little tiny lump? That's the Taj Mahal. It's so hazy, you just can't see it. And that's usually how it looks, right? Then this is a traditional dance and a traditional performance in Kochi, which is in southern India. Um, Arts and religion are very, very, very important in the South. And so you'll see a lot of beautiful museums. You'll see beautiful costumes like this of people walking down the street. They just got out of a theater performance. And like they'll even bring you in, like before this theater performance started, you were allowed to come in early and watch them paint the people's faces and like learn about why they use certain colors. What's the history of this? What's the history of that? And so it's a beautiful thing to be able to experience. And then this is the Golden City. So you see the peacock here. It's all carved out of sandstone. You see that this is at sunset, so it's a little bit more of a golden tint. The whole city looks like this. And at like during sunset, the whole place is just vibrant. Oh, and then thank you. That's the end. But thank you all so much. I want to go ahead and give you my contact information before we get into Q&A. I'm also offering, so this is my website, my email, my socials. Pretty much everything is at chasing.candice for socials, except Facebook, which is just chasing Candice. I'd also like to offer, I'll put my newsletter link in the chat. But I'm giving away a freebie for like mindful travel photography, which comes with a little shot list, some questions to ask yourself before taking photos and to help you become like a more mindful traveler. So I'll link that to anybody who'd like to join. But I'll leave you with this. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm so excited for your trip to India because I know it's coming. It's going to be great. This quote is a really beautiful one. If you have time to read it, it's from Keith Bellows, who was a Nat Geo traveler. He was a publisher. He ran Nat Geo for a long time. I want to say in the 80s, but it's a beautiful summary of what India is and what to expect, right? Mm, But thank you all so much. I'm so excited for your questions.
Thank you, Candice. That was amazing. And you do, first of all, you have so much positivity and it just shines through when you speak. And so I don't know about everyone else, but I just feel so intrigued now to go even more so, just the way you've explained it in such great detail and color. So thank you for sharing all of that because I know it's a wonderful country to go to. And I think you've just shown it in a different light. So appreciate that very much so.
Thank you
Yes,
so
so if anyone has questions, definitely drop them in the group chat and I can ask them. I wanted to start, I had a couple, one we were discussing first. One person had been to the Blue City in Morocco. Do you know how does that differ than the Blue City that you were talking about in India? Is it similar in terms of look and feel? I was just curious.
It is different. Just because I want to say the one in Morocco is slightly newer, and it doesn't have the same, like, they don't have the same caste system, so it doesn't have the same roots as far as why it's blue and whatnot. I don't know if the Blue City in Morocco is also Hindi, because that would make a difference because that's why they have the blue, like that's why it's blue in India is because of the Hindu traditions and mythology. So, yeah, I can't totally answer that one.
Yeah, no, I was just curious too. It's because
Yeah.
you hear about it, in different places. So, okay. I was curious for the first time traveling to India, how long would you recommend someone to go for?
Minimum, I would say if you can do 2 weeks, do 2 weeks. Because the first day or two, you're adjusting. You're adjusting a lot to the temperature, like the busyness of it, or the time difference too. Like the time difference really messes with all of us. So I'd give yourself at least 2 days to acclimatize. Give yourself a day to adjust to the city that you're in and like just have a walk around day. Um, so I would say 2 weeks would be perfect. You could fit 2, maybe 3 cities in that time. Ideally 2 weeks would be perfect. If you can only do a week, you could do the Golden Triangle in a week. It would just be a little bit of a mad dash.
So could you do in 2 weeks the north and the south? Would you recommend that?
Ooh, that would be a tough one. You could do it. It's a big, so that's the other thing. India is so big. It's so big. That to get from, so I took a train. I don't recommend this. No, no, no. I took a train from Delhi uh, to the Golden City, which is on the far side of Rajasthan. So it's a pretty long ways. It took 28 hours. It was a very long, or 24 hours. It was a very long train ride. Sure, one long train ride, go for it. Experience it. Get it out of your system. If you're only there for a week, don't do it. Please, you'll hate it. It's so much. Do like 9 hours or less. And so then I was like, oh, well, 24 wasn't too bad. I'll go north to south by train. No, it was 60 hours and it was too much. You'll hate it.
Wow. Yeah.
Mia
Okay.
got super sick. It was miserable. Not worth it. If you can fly, flying is a good option. Um, but I would
Yeah.
not. It's a lot to fit both north and south in.
Okay. Only do it if you can fly and get there quickly. Okay. Or do it over two different types of trips. And then time of year, I know there can be some times that have pretty bad weather. So when you've gone, have you gone every time at the same time each year, or what would you recommend?
I usually go in the winter time here, like it's winter here, and then it's a little bit of monsoon season. Like I'm usually at the tail end of it. Because I want to say November, December is kind of a calm period of time in India as far as travelers go. That's usually when it's a little less because the holidays and stuff. So that's usually when I go, and because it's a little less busy. You get a lot cheaper accommodations and whatnot, and people aren't quite as burnt out. Like, I don't know if anybody's worked in service before, either as a tour guide or, working at a restaurant, but there's seasons when you burn out pretty hard. And so, like, the end of season, their busy season, they're pretty exhausted, just like we would be. And so I try to aim it for like winter. January, February is also really nice. Monsoon season in the south is going to be October, November, I think. Um, yeah, so I'd wait till like monsoons are over, but like shoulder season is best. I wouldn't go in the summer. No
Yeah.
roast. It's like being in Georgia with mosquitoes. It's miserable.
Yeah. That doesn't
You
sound
know?
fun. Okay. So food, talking about food, what would you recommend, or what other types of food are there besides curry? Because we always hear about curry.
Yes, everybody loves curry, but there's like dosas and there's like the banana leaf is really popular in the south. So it comes on a big, huge banana leaf and it's a big heaping pile of rice. And then little tiny chutneys and stuff that you mix in at like you can have a little bit of rice with this and a little bit of rice with that and whatnot. And so it's more of a choose your own adventure meal, and that's usually served at like breakfast or lunch. In the South, they also have papadum, which are these little tiny like disc looking things that are floofy dough balls that are almost like a savory donut. And then they also mix a bunch of chutneys and stuff. And so it's just meant to dip in and eat those. And that's a common breakfast in the South. There's also dosas, which are thin, almost like crispy crepe like things that you can mix in with um, almost everything has a dipping thing. It's very similar to Turkey, where like dip culture is very prevalent, or like everything is dipped in, or like extra spice here, choose your own adventure for your spice levels, etc. Um, Biryani is also a really beautiful dish that's baked in a clay pot, and it's almost like fried rice, but in a clay pot. And so there's like, and they make it in layers. So it's like rice, and then they put chicken or whatever meat, and then it's vegetables on top, and then they bake it in this like enclosed space. And that's really amazing. Tandoori is a type of oven that's common in India. That's like those big giant flower pots that we see at like Target that are like the size of us, right? It's basically that, but there's a giant fire in the center of it. And for tandoori, they'll bake chicken over it like a grate, like a grill. They also will slap naan on the side of the clay pot fire, and it'll like roast in there. So tandoori anything is like barbecue, right? But like Indian style. So there's tons of variety as far as food goes. Curries definitely are like the most accessible, I would say. And it's general, at least one curry is included in all dishes. If you're looking for something that's a little bit less curry soupy, there's also it's called palak paneer, and so it's technically a curry, but it's a spinach base instead of like a cream base. And especially in the South, their cream isn't like cow's milk cream necessarily, even though cows are sacred and like milk is very like integral of Indian cooking and whatnot. It's actually cashew cream. They blend, like they soak cashews, blend that into a cream, and that's the root of a lot of like cream-based curries in the South.
Interesting. And then did you find a big difference between each North versus South cuisine? Yeah.
Yeah, even like if I got the same meal in the north and then the same meal in the south, they were totally different. Whether vegetables were included or if it was just like the sauce and meat or if there was spice like hot spice, like spicy spice. Because all foods are spiced well and deeply. But the north doesn't generally put hot spice, whereas the south, it's definitely hot spice. And theirs are going to be more like sauteed vegetables, grilled vegetables, things of that nature. Whereas in the north, if there are vegetables, they're soaked in like a stew in the curry, typically.
Okay.
Coffee is also better in the south because it actually grows there.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I'm glad I'm on mute because my stomach's growling now because this is a lot of talk about delicious food. And it's dinner time. So well, not yet,
Mhm.
but almost. But wow, I'm starving now. Okay, and I'm going to end with one final question. If anyone has something, drop it in the chat before we go. But if you had to go back, what would be the one destination, if you could only choose one, that you would go back to in India?
Yeah, I would love to go back to Mumbai. My first time in Mumbai, it was very quick. I was there for 4 days, but it was at the tail end of my trip. I was pretty exhausted. And I think Mumbai was also going through a big rejuvenation phase at that point. Like most of the buildings were shut down for renovations and stuff. Like almost all my photos have like scaffolding and construction workers on them and whatnot from that time. So I think that Mumbai was in like a period of growth and change and evolution. And I also think that I've evolved so much since I was there last. Like I did a slums tour in Mumbai, which was changing in every way. Like I'm always hesitant of those kinds of tours when it's like poverty porn, and like that's not a good vibe. But all of the proceeds from this tour company went directly into the school, and it was all ran by people who live in the slums, and they were like presenting it in a really beautiful way of like, yeah, this might be slums, but if this didn't exist, then we'd have even more plastic pollution. If this didn't exist, this would be wasted. If this didn't exist, like there's so much to it. Like Louis Vuitton gets all of their leather made at this slum in Mumbai. And so like if again it's even like a little bit heartbreaking to be like, oh well, because of this slum, now we have luxury leather goods available to West, like there's a balance. It's that nuance that I talked about before. Um, but I think knowing what I know now, I would have a lot different questions to ask the tour guides while going through those spaces and stuff. And I think that Mumbai would be um, a really moving, changing space for me.
I love it. Okay, I think that's a perfect way to end. So thank you so much. I'm going to share real quick in the chat just other ways you can connect with us. And then I'm going to share my screen one more time before we all go. But these are just some of our upcoming events we have. I know you all know how to register for these since you're here now, but we have our December community virtual happy hours. We have these once a month. So we have one coming up on the 12th. Then we have one in January. And then the next event we're doing is how Americans can move to Europe. And then we have our community tours. So interesting enough, we just spoke about India. We have one coming up in March. So if this has piqued your interest, definitely head on over to the nomadicnetwork.com/tours to get more information on that. We've got Greece, Morocco, Vietnam, Peru, epic, epic places we're going to in 2025. And that's it. Thank you all truly so much for being here tonight, today, this morning, wherever everyone is. I think we're all pretty much in the US, but it's been wonderful to see you all. Thank you for keeping your videos on too, which has been fun. And Candice, thank you for giving us such a great overview of India. I told you before the call that I've been dying to get there for many, many years. I can't wait to get there someday. So thank you for joining us all today, you guys.
Thank you so much for hosting too. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
So fun. All right, everyone, have a great evening, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.